refreshing. There we are.
We are. Been forever.
Yeah, it has been.
We kind of fell off the turnip truck there for the summer. It was like something for you, something for me,
Yeah.
weather, natural things like natural disasters happening, like just kind of crazy.
Yep. And then just obviously like vacation. I went to that tabletop conference, and then you went to the speaking engagement that you had with Robert and Claire and the
Hmm.
training. So just all over the place. But I'm happy that we can sit down and have another stream together.
Yes, same here. And as we've talked about so many times, things in technology can change quickly or advance or the conversations or whatever. So now it's how do we bring what's happened in the industry here from the last few months too. So
Yep.
we'll be um, I mean, I know it's funny because we talked there for a while about the metaverse and everything was metaverse this and metaverse that and the uses and the safety and millions slash billions of dollars going into the metaverse, and now hardly anybody's talking about the metaverse. And that wasn't that long ago.
Yep.
And my hope is when these hype cycles happen, I think it's great because it gets so much attention and energy in these directions, and then monies can be put into it.
Mhm.
um, I wouldn't want to be the person whose money was going into it because it's a huge risk, but the fact that money goes into it means that development and advancements can happen. And then I'm actually happy after that happens for it to get quiet,
Right.
because then when it gets quiet, the people who are involved, the ones who are really there because they have a passion, they have a purpose, they see something in it that they feel is really important, for the most part, those are the people who stay.
Hmm.
And the people who wanted to make a I'm going to say quick buck in in air quotes because that's a laden term, but um, the people who really were in it for opportunistic reasons
Hmm.
tend to trail off.
Yep.
So, and again, those are generalizations. There will be people in both categories that will go one way or the other, but um, the summer has been filled and so filled with AI.
Hmm.
Uh, and I'm part of a group. I think I've mentioned it on one of our streams, but I'm part of a group that is really active. I mean, every day I wake up to dozens of messages from this group, all kinds of articles and links and questions. And some of them are just, in my opinion, way out there, but some of them really get you thinking.
Hmm.
So it's going to be interesting to see how that hype cycle develops, and then where some of it lands. Um, so anyway, I it's been a full summer with both activities and all the stuff we just listed, but also watching the industry go in some directions and then things getting more quiet and things getting more active. So I think over the next few podcasts, I'm sure or streams, um, we'll be touching on some of the advancements that have happened, but it's pretty exciting. I told you when we first got on, Michael, that I've been the last 2 days just sort of entrenched in stuff to do with AI because I'm teaching a course on ChatGPT through Corewell,
Hmm.
and they contacted me and said, "Hey, we really want a course on this. Will you teach it?" And I've been using ChatGPT for a while, and I think it has great uses.
Hmm.
There are certainly lots of conversations about AI that are important for us to have as a society, and different ways it can be used and should be and shouldn't be and all that kind of stuff. But when you boil
Absolutely.
it down to the ways that we can use it to make our lives a little bit easier, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, it
pretty
really is.
fantastic. So so I'm excited to teach that and to do that. And so I'm gonna segue it right into what we're talking about because
Hmm.
I liked the topic that you brought up, and I'm gonna let you describe it because it was the one that you brought up. But I thought, okay, we just discussed it like moments before coming on, so I didn't get to prepare a list for myself or whatever. So I popped in some prompts into Chat GPT. It pulls up a whole list, and I want to be clear. This is one thing I'm going to go over a lot in the class. I want to be clear that this is I liken it to a Google search on steroids or
Hmm.
whatever browser you're using. Do a Firefox search, a Google search. I don't care what you're using, but a search on steroids. So like what you do when you're going to Google something, we have that now as a verb, right? um, when you're going to Google something, you you craft a prompt.
Hmm.
You put in keywords, and then it pops up with a whole bunch of links and usually pages worth of them. And then you have to go through and pick those, whichever ones sound interesting or most relevant or whatever, and then you search through that information. And there's value in that because you might
Yep.
come across something that you hadn't even thought of that might bring you in a different direction or that supports what it is that you were doing anyway or thinking. But there's also a lot of time taken in going through all of those, trying to find the things that are most relevant and useful. I see ChatGPT as something very similar, but instead of bringing up a bunch of links, it collates information
Yep.
into if you ask it to write a list, it's going to give you a list. If you ask it to write 3 paragraphs, it's going to give you 3 paragraphs. Like the form that you're asking it to do in, and then the prompts that you're using. And to me, it's all about the prompts. It's all about prompt creation. And
Hmm.
so when I did that, it pulls up a bunch of stuff, and some of it fits and some of it doesn't.
Right.
My knowledge, education, expertise, all those things, just as anyone else's, that's key because we need to read these things and decide what fits and what doesn't. But I mean, and again, I'm going to let you describe what we're talking about, but like it gave beautiful lists. I asked for 2 types of lists. I got 2 types of lists. Some of it I'll use, some of it I won't. But in moments,
Hmm.
now my brain is like oriented. Here's our topic. Here are some of the things I'm gonna like spout on about like I normally do.
No, no, I mean, I love that, because it is true. And I think that actually, like you said, goes in with what we're talking about because it's funny, I thought about all of this when I was at, the convention that's like tabletopping. So it's kind of like I went backwards in terms of like, I played a lot of tabletops when I was younger and, like trading card games, like Pokemon in, 1995. And I really love that there's, like a set of rules. There's certain conditions that you're following. And so it's fascinating because, you're thinking about so many things in which we act with our behavior, and especially, neurodivergent population being able to kind of like what you said, organize certain things that we need to get done or tasks or prioritization. And I know that I'm sure everyone has heard it. The idea that utilizing games, especially for children and probably adults too, I'm sure I've probably heard that before as well, but it worsens or lessens our attention span. And I used it to actually increase attention span and focus and organization, a lot of the executive functioning. So it's really fascinating to me. So I thought it would be a great, topic because I see I have gotten comments before in the field, such as, uh, how do you translate what they're learning and what they're doing within the gameplay to real life situations? Like, yeah, they may be motivated to, play a game, but how does that translate to, getting them to do their homework? um,
Right.
and so, I think it's a very valid question for sure. But I think that there's a lot within the repetition and like muscle memory and organization of even just tedious tasks in game. Like I know people find that games are very motivating and absolutely are, but there's also aspects of games that are also very tedious. And I know,
Oh my gosh, tedium. I one of our frequent listeners, Fiona, introduced me to a game. I talk a lot about like playing what I call, again, air quotes, stupid games. It doesn't mean itself is stupid. It just means that it doesn't take a lot of thought. It's a lot
yeah,
of grinding. It's a lot of those repetitive tasks, those tedious things. And sometimes my brain really needs that. I
yeah,
just need to do something. It feels like I'm accomplishing something, and it doesn't take a whole lot of thought. And right now, it's the cutest little thing. So the game is called Dreamdale,
hmm,
and there's there are a lot of things you have to do that are typical of other games of gathering things and building buildings with those materials and like
mm-hmm,
all that kind of stuff. But it has this one aspect that is so cute. That is, you have to get wool from sheep. So
mm-hmm.
you have these little sheep that are in a pen, a field, and you walk over and you get close enough to them, and your little character, it goes like it makes a little pop noise, and all of a sudden the sheep is in your arms, and you run over to this little. It looks sort of like a factory, and it's got a chute, and you get close enough to the chute, and the little sheep goes into the chute, and its little legs flutter and flutter
Oh my
like
gosh.
like it's going in. And I was kind of terrified at first because I was like, oh my gosh, did I just kill the sheep? And I understand this is a computer game. I understand. But emotionally, I didn't want to do anything mean. So
Right?
I was so thrilled to see the little sheared sheep pop out of the other side. Like it's no longer got all the white fluffy on it. Now it's this gray little skinny body, and it runs back to the field. And then a pop of wool pops out. But like right now, one of my tasks, I need like 250 sheep balls, like wool balls.
Mm-hmm.
That's tedium. That's up, grab a sheep, back to the thing, up, grab a sheep, back to the thing. And so tedium can be a big part of these games, but it can
Yep.
also, it serves a purpose, that repetitive, that cause and effect. There's something that's can be simultaneously irritating and completely satisfying all at the same time about having those kinds of tasks. And
Absolutely.
the wonderful thing is I can do that as long as I need to, and then I can switch to something else. I can do like 20 of them and walk away and do something else.
Mm-hmm.
And then later on when I play again, and over time, I'll have enough to, to complete the task. But tedium, I think, is something that a lot of people think of as negative,
Yep.
and I'm just giving this example to show that there can be benefits to it as well.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. What Wolf is saying, in our chat, we call that the grind, and absolutely, Wolf, that's one of the things that we're talking, you know, yes, I don't want to say like typical, but I guess just some of the comments that people have about, games either lessening attention span, or maybe like not being as motivating. How does it transfer to, real physical life scenarios? But I do think that repetition, especially that you're speaking about, Jess, of doing these tedious tasks over and over and over, like you start to condition yourself to when you get to the mode of needing to do. At least I find myself doing it, and just in my experience, in the field of working with people, that the more that they're able to have that experience and also get positive feedback from it, but there's also negative feedback from it as well. The idea that a lot of people may not perform a certain way, maybe they couldn't get a certain amount of, as you were saying, the wool task completed for the day. um, and so there's a lot of frustration within themselves. uh, and it's fascinating too, because the other one is like, oh, it's a quick dopamine hit, it's a quick reward. What is it teaching? But a lot of these games, specifically, I can even mention, like Pokemon Go. It's like you have to send a gift to a friend 30 days in a row. There's a lot you can extend out a lot of these tasks to kind of have delayed gratification, rather than just having these simple, oh, just do a couple things and you get the gratification. So I think there's a
Mhm.
lot of conditioning that can be done with this to help a lot of the executive functioning skills, while also building as a lot of emotional intelligence as well, of being able to look at how they internalize their beliefs of their performance in terms of maybe tasks that are a little more complex. And so I love the interesting and just kind of beautiful aspect of being able to go from simple to complex to tedious to complex, back and forth. And what people may see as oh, that's just like a game task, that's something they're motivated or fun. I'll tell you, like and I'm sure you could probably admit, probably about after the like maybe 40th time of going and collecting your wool ball, you're like, okay, this is no longer fun, it's tedious, it's frustrating, but that reward of working towards it will ultimately pay off, because you work so hard to do it. And like I think
Yes.
that underlying concept can be applied to so many things in life. Like, yeah, homework is not fun, but then when you get a good grade at the end of the class, like, yeah, that feels really good, a great sense of accomplishment. So it's always fun for me to look at the parallels between the underlying concepts of these tasks within digital
Oh,
platforms and everyday life.
absolutely. I, I don't know if it was my end. Maybe I disappeared for a minute. Hopefully it was me and not you, because you were the one who was in the middle of talking. Yes, I want to sidebar for just a minute. I know that's a super shocker, but I want to sidebar in the. I continue to learn, and I continue to strive toward learning more and more and more about important things that Dr. Robert Jason Grant talks about.
Mm-hmm.
And he's been on our stream before, and we could have him on 100 times and continue to learn from him. He's amazing. And one of the things that you mentioned, the training that I was doing with Robert and Claire, or in the beginning of part of August. And one of the things that continues to come up is um, are the distinctions between neurodiverse, neurodivergent,
Mm-hmm.
ableism. And so in our conversation here, I mean, I think there's part of my brain that feels like I mix the neurodiverse and neurodivergent concepts together, that they're similar enough, but the more I learn and the more I explore and the more I think through it, they're not neurodivergent. Like, to diverge is, to go in different directions, and neurodivergent feels much more separatist to me, that we're doing an us and them kind of conversation. And neurodiverse, I've said for a long time that I really believe that there is a lot more neurodiversity than there is, um, I'm not even sure what the other word, I want to say, like, neurotypical, and that's not correct in this concept either. So I'm not sure the other word, but like, we, I think as a field, as a society, we have spent time trying to do more of an us and them. And I mean, the DSM is built on that, like
Mm-hmm.
different categorizations. On some level, we need that because, for instance, in psychology, if we're talking about somebody who is schizophrenic, then that gives us an idea. Someone who is diagnosed as schizophrenic gives us an idea of what symptoms they might be experiencing,
True.
what their lives might look like, what kind of meds they might need. Just some general ideas, versus somebody who might be diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. And there might be some similarities in their presentation, but at least we have some ideas of what that might be like or look like for those particular people. So some categorizations help us in certain realms, but then they can also limit us in certain realms. And I think that what's actually typical is neurodiversity.
Hmm.
When we think of neurodiversity, I mean, it's acknowledgement that we are all different and that there is a tapestry
Hmm.
of how human beings appear and function and interests and approaches and coping skills and styles and all that stuff. So neurodiversity seems more encompassing to me and more realistic. If we think of neurodivergent, like what actually is neurotypical, what is neurodivergent, and you might be thinking, listening to this, like, why is she going off on this tangent? And part of it is because of the title of our talk today and things like that, but also because when we're thinking about our clients, when we're thinking about our treatment plans, our case conceptualizations, when we're thinking about all of those pieces, and we as therapists might have, and parents and caregivers might have, most likely have, all of us most likely have, and then teachers have some set of parameters of what
Hmm.
somebody's behavior is supposed to look like, somebody's approach is supposed to look like, and and that may be considered what is typical, and then someone is not typical, so now we're trying to get them to be typical. and and I think that has, just like categorizations, it has pluses and minuses to it. It has strengths and weaknesses of it. And I would like for us to really focus on, whether we're using digital tools or not, I would like for us as field to really focus on what does this client need, and what is that, how does that show up for that client? How does that get defined? How does the client feel about it?
Hmm.
And are this client's interests? If they are of the digital nature, then it makes sense to me and to you, I know, to then try to find ways to meet those needs in the digital realm, because that is a place of comfort and knowledge and interest for them. It doesn't mean you can't do other things as well, but like how we define what these goals even are is where I'm going with all of this. So you were mentioning executive functioning, and if there is an area, say, let's just go for some low hanging fruit of like some organizational difficulties,
Hmm.
we can say this is this is how we're defining this client's organizational difficulties based on information from the client, information from the parents and caregivers, information from the teacher, multiple sources. This is how this shows up for this kid of, and let's just go something somewhat simple, like not turning in their homework.
Hmm.
So you have a task that has been given to you. Your job is to perform the task, and then your job is to complete the task by turning it in. For me, go back to the sheep. So I have a task. I want to build this building. I need 250 wool. My task is to go gather all that wool. If I don't turn that wool in to the little place that, takes it from my backpack, then I'm not going to complete my goal, which is to build the thing.
Hmm.
So there's a task completion in there. And that's over and over and over and over and over. And I mean, I could keep going with overs, right? In so many video games.
Yep.
Tasks presented, the thing you have to do, and then task completion. And getting clients who have difficulty with executive functioning, difficulty with organization, difficulty with turning something in as one of the examples of those things, how beautiful is it to identify that that's the thing, and this is how it shows up in a video game, and this is the thing that we're going to work on and how we're going to work on it, and then taking it another step at some point, if appropriate for that client and all the things, but I'd say many times it is, that then we speak to that.
Hmm.
We we make a bridge between this task presentation, task not completion, but doing it and then task completion in the game, we make a parallel between that and your homework.
Yep. Yeah.
And that's one example, and I'm trying to keep it on the simpler side and something that most people can identify with. Now, the other thing is like if we're identify something like something to do with social skills, I think we have to be really careful, which it ties back into the conversation I was just having about neurodiversity and neurotypical and neurodivergent, and we have to be really careful of how we define what those social skills might be and whether or not we're trying to force somebody into some predetermined definition of how things should be. So when we're looking for parallels in the video games,
Hmm.
I think it's really important that we, just like I was saying earlier, with how important prompt creation is in using something like an LLM like ChatGPT, that prompt creation is key. Here, the identification of what the client's needs are and that treatment plan and case conceptualization, those are key. Because once you understand those, then you're going to be able to properly identify the processes in the video games and then move forward in the interventions. But we need to be really cognizant that we're not being ableist and we're not trying to force people into what our predefined version of something is. Does that make sense? Did I just make sense?
No, no, I think it makes great sense. I think it's definitely a better way of explaining it for sure. And maybe I'll introduce another word, but instead of neurotypical, using neurofunctioning, since we're often defining things as, areas of dysfunction when we're doing a diagnosis. Whether it's impacting social, home environments, school environments, career, everything, work environments. I find it fascinating because going to adding on to your point as being able to find, I think it's really interesting, and the repetition of the games, and I think the simulation of the games that you and I obviously always talk about. But once you're able to get them to identify a task, like you were saying, organization, and they're able to do the task, and we equate that to doing the homework. I mean, then you can add more layers on there related to, because sometimes you may get someone who is able to do things, but maybe it takes them a lot of time naturally, like that. What's the problem with that, right? But again, when we're talking in the context of other things, functioning and survivability. Obviously, if you're working at a job, and unfortunately, a lot of jobs, you can't just do one task for the whole day. And oftentimes, you have to multitask. You have to carry a lot of things. And I love that the games just have the layers that you can add that in there. You can. I don't want to say like induce stress as like a negative thing, because I think that inducing stress in like a safe environment, and obviously like a small amount of stress. So I'm not saying we're gonna like start like screaming at the kid or something to go faster. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying like, the ability to have a safe environment and to be able to, um, look to see, okay, maybe we add in a time element. How many can you do in 3 minutes? Of doing the wool, and then we can start to add more distractions. So we can see, okay, do they get distracted? Do they stop and watch what that person is doing inside the game instead of running forward with the wool? Like, if there's another NPC, non-player character, for anyone that's saying what is NPC, but if they're saying, "Hey, come over here and talk to me," and the child's naturally interested, within the game context, to kind of, well, oh, what does this person want me to do? Is this a side quest? Is it another quest that I can do? And they get lost off of their task, that they're doing. It's time. So like, there's so many elements, and I think that goes to the parameters, like you were saying. It goes to us being able to, like chat gpt, give them a prompt, and then tailor the prompt, alter the prompt, make it more specific, and I think that that's a great learning visualization for therapists to use with really all ages. I'm not going to say just children, because I am a big fan of like that firsthand experience, and first person experience of playing games to learn so much about yourself. and the even just the environment that you're in. Like small side note, but just started playing like a new trading card game with Ashley, and so I'll play online just to like play a few games to learn. It's quick and fast, but then we also do go to like a store nearby and we'll actually play in person. And I find like my approach to the game or like my own behavior like changes, whether I'm sitting playing digitally and playing in person is really fascinating to me, but I learned so much about myself. I think like when I'm playing digitally, I find myself getting a little more antsy in terms of like wanting the person that I'm playing to like finish their turn so that I can get to my turn. So, and I'm not actually talking to them. Like I'm just watching them on the computer screen, kind of play, and it's like, come on, like pass to my turn. Let's go. You can't do anything else on your turn. But when I'm playing in person, like I don't feel that way at all. I'm just like totally relaxed, like letting them take their time. And so it's fascinating to just learn so much about that. Like I think that's a great like social skills example, as you were mentioning, through the use of gameplay, but also I do notice little things like the digital aspect. There is a time element. The game has an inherent timer in your actions. So like sometimes you're sitting there thinking, trying to plan out your turn because a lot of things have the conditions like you must settle or resolve this condition before you do another. There's certain things like you're attacking within the game, so you want to attack with one and then attack with another because it's like a combo together that you're doing. But if you do it the opposite way, you can totally mess up your turn, and in a lot of times that actually causes you to lose the game because they like you then have to spend your next turn catching up, and they've now gained a turn. So super fascinating, super complex, but when you're playing the digital aspect of it, you're like sitting there playing and next thing you know you just see a big fat like 10-second timer just ticking down and like you just get so anxious you start like trying to throw out all your actions and everything and you're like, did I do that right? So there's like this just really I think beautiful thing about the digital world that's obviously one safe, um, two exciting, three very multi-sensory, which creates kind of I core memories of learning for me, whether it's negative or positive. And then four, just as us being able to kind of control and manipulate that environment as well for them, even if it's not directly within the gameplay. I mean, you could sit there and say, okay, I have a stopwatch here. How many wool can you collect in 5 minutes? Even if you can't affect the game, you can still put your own creativity in there to induce different elements and just assess where they're at, like you were saying, like, wow, how did they do when there was a timer, or what was their behavior like, what did they say to themselves, like if they didn't complete it, how quickly could they get back on task. Like I love that the games are just an intervention and an assessment for us.
Absolutely. And you can tie that into different experiences they might have at school too. There are timed tests. There
Absolutely.
are, how many math problems can you get done in 3 minutes or whatever that might be. So if they're having difficulties in those areas, then you can help them work through that. And if that's really stressful to them, that tells you something. What's stressful about it? How in something that doesn't result in a grade, doesn't have the same pressures and stress to it as it might in school, you can do it over and over and over again, most likely in the game. For the example of the wool, like I have to get 250 wool. Even if I didn't have to, I can just get as many wool as I want to. So to do it over and over again, to say, okay, let's try that again, to pause it, to talk it through, to okay, what happens in your mind, in your body, in your mind, in your anything that in the middle of that you feel like takes you off course from the task, and identifying those pieces in a way that in a sense it boils down to a controlled environment, right?
Yep.
Because we're in this interaction, we're in this game, there's no real world consequences. We can do it over and over and over and over and over again as many times as we need to. We can stop in the middle, we can abort it, we can do something different. Like we have so many ways. Once you have the concept identified,
Right.
you can find it in so many different areas, so many different games. I want to say all of the time that's probably not true. I'm just having a hard time thinking of a time when you can't, but I'm going to say super confidently most of the time
Yeah.
you can. I'm sure there's some obscure therapeutic goal that I just haven't come across yet that or isn't on my radar that you can't. But like I think you can pretty much anything because it's human action, it's human interaction. It's
Absolutely.
even though it's computer generated, it's created by and played by humans.
Mm-hmm.
so so there are going to be components of it that you can identify in any of the interactions as long as you understand what it is and you understand the game enough to identify where those things show up and
Mm-hmm.
then utilize that, capitalize on it. It's very opportunistic. I do,
Yep.
people are very interesting to me. I know I say this all the time. I just have such a hard time wrapping my head around how people don't see the opportunities in using digital games in therapy. And and I've talked through that with myself often saying, okay, other people see it differently, which I respect and I get that because we all see things a little bit differently in many ways. And so I'm not arguing that. I'm just trying to figure out how come I see it. I'm not seeing it the way they see it.
Right.
And so, I've talked myself in circles frequently with
I
that.
I think I'm in the same boat as you, so
Well, see, and that's why we are here chit-chatting about these things for the last couple of years.
I think it's just because obviously I think one we've lived it, as we were mentioning, growing up and like playing games and kind of seeing those aspects, and then it's like for me once I started utilizing it, and it just felt like a huge light bulb just clicked. The first client that I'd ever used a digital medium with, I just wow, like I almost felt like later when I was reflecting on it, I had kind of like this out of body experience of like being a smaller child myself watching my cousins play and just non-descriptive like as like a 7-year old just kind of saying wow you did that and I was just like wow this just makes so much sense. But you're right, there are so many opportunities, and then I think it's just as one of the things that you always mention that I think is just so beautifully put is just the themes always show up. It doesn't matter what type of play it is, whether it's digital play, whether it's um, I guess in-person physical play, air quotes. The
Mhm.
You're always going to see those themes. Like if you have a child who struggles with something and they just shut down quickly because they don't understand it, that's very common. When they're playing a game, I mean, you're likely to see that same thing in a classroom if they don't understand an assignment, and maybe they're the child that doesn't ask for help, so that they start to fall behind, and naturally you're going to see that come up in your playroom as well. If they're shutting down, I don't want to play that game anymore, and you're okay, and then you start seeing that go across so many other games, or even switching between digital and physical play. You're playing a board game and they don't want to play anymore. Like you see so many of these things, and I'm right there with you where it's just like sometimes it's just I would say most, if not all the time, it's very obvious to me, like you were saying. But sometimes it's not as obvious, but it shows up in a very obscure way that if you sit and reflect, you can start to make the connections through, like you said, as you're putting together a lot of other source of information, through the assessment from the client, from, parents, school, however much information you have access to that, people have signed off on. You will start to see, even if it is very obscure, therapeutic goal, it will like eventually just pop out and punch you in the face when you start connecting everything together, kind of like chat gpt.
Yep. Yeah, it makes me both very introspective and thoughtful when I both have these conversations like we're having right now, or I hear people's questions. I just did a 2 day, 2 full day training for a group in South Korea,
Hmm.
and it was amazing to hear their questions. And so, and it always is when I'm teaching or just even having conversation chit chats about these things, but uh, to have people all of a sudden like a light bulb goes off, like they all of a sudden see, oh my gosh, I was thinking of it in terms of these being sort of throwaway, unimportant um environments and interactions that people are having within these video games, and if nothing else, they take away from
Hmm.
the important things of life and whatnot. And now all of a sudden I'm recognizing that there are so many parallels, and they're not saying it that way. I'm summarizing obviously, but um I love it when that happens, because not just because, oh, now you see what I'm talking about, but more in the your ability to provide services for your clients just expanded exponentially
Hmm.
in you recognizing something that I think is, and I believe you, I don't want to speak for you, Michael, but I think you believe it too, that I think is so fundamental to play therapy. And that is that we're identifying components of the person's life, of the person's interactions, of what they're sharing with us, all those things of their play. We're identifying those things, and we're understanding important aspects and components of our clients. And then we're working toward helping them in areas of difficulty.
Right.
And just as you and I have said from the beginning, it's just another tool. Like this is another tool to do that. And on one hand, it's just another tool, as is anything else. And on the other hand, it has the capacity and the capability to be so much more,
Right.
because of all the options out there, because of the different game mechanics. I mean, to me, understanding more about game mechanics, and I will not profess to be some expert in that. I have definitely read about it. I've written about the things that I've read about in order to bring it together for people and concepts and stuff, but I'm certainly not an expert in that whatsoever. But the more we can learn about game mechanics, the more we can understand the underpinnings of the interactions and
Hmm.
then apply them that much better to what our clients need. Um, I feel like I'm on a little bit of a soapbox, and I don't mean I don't mean to be, but it's just something that I feel really passionate about.
No, I think what you're saying is huge, and I love that you brought that up because it is these interactions, whether it's client and the gameplay, or client with other people within the gameplay, whether that's with a therapist, or whether they're outside of the therapy room and they're playing with like a friend. There, it's such rich content. It's like I think it'd be really like kind of, maybe this is something you could throw into like a training, but kind of like just create this hypothetical situation of, okay, as a therapist, like how awesome would it be if a client came in, and let's just say it's like maybe later teenage, adolescent, or maybe even adult, and said, yeah, I had this interaction with a friend. We disagreed on what we were doing together. I wanted to do this, and they, just very general information, but you can clearly see that there's, some frustration. There's maybe some guilt of, maybe forcing, let's say a person just no, we're going to play this. I want it to be my way, type of thing. Again, this is all hypothetical. I'm just making it up, but the details don't really matter. The concept does. and then you're like, wow, yeah, like everyone in the room, probably thinking, oh wow, that's great. I have so much to work with. I could work with, and you're like, okay, that same person that came in said that they did this while in a headset playing a game online, and they were doing an activity, and they were both like going back and forth on what they wanted to do in the game and all that kind of stuff, and they're and then basically just laying out like, do you see how rich it is? And it doesn't matter fully. Now it matters in a sense that you look at, like you said, the mechanics and what is the concept, what is the underlying aspect of what they're doing within the game, but it doesn't, the actual physical platform itself does not matter. The idea that they're playing a game does not matter. It's the rich, interactions and feelings and thoughts and beliefs that they have towards something
Mhm.
is, and it's, like we would all love to have a client that could come in and do that, right? So it's just like, but it's funny to kind of like see that if we just extract the fact that they were with a headset on playing an
Right.
online game, people would probably like think this is amazing. But then once you throw that in there, there's like this notion that comes in, like you said, this dismissal of the environment, this, oh, I thought that was just not genuine, but like you can clearly see that it is genuine, because a lot of people do have really, strong emotion toward things in gameplay, with interactions within the gameplay, or the interaction with, friends or even strangers with gameplay as well.
Mhm. Absolutely. I just want to echo everything that you just said, because if you extract those components out, I think you were presenting it to people, you'd get a lot of head nods and like, yes, and oh, that's so powerful, and it's so, all these things, and then you're like, oh, by the way, they were in a headset, or they were playing, I can't even think, Tears, the new Zelda, new,
Hmm.
it's not that new, but it's newish, um, new game, whatever it might be, then all of a sudden somehow it, for some people, it loses the power that it had, and it's just so confusing.
Yeah, God, it's really funny because I almost feel like in some way you could have this like really kind of just great training where just like the first 30 minutes of like you introducing a client, that you've created hypothetically in your head,
Absolutely.
and you
I was
use
thinking the
nothing
same.
but digital, and then like give like a, a vignette, type of thing, and ask them to identify like the, the therapeutic, goals, and then also, okay, this is what I ended up doing with them. But again, don't use the fact that you've digital, and put in the therapeutic powers of play, and just have them all kind of list them out loud, and then like, hit the same slides, but now you've now put in the digital game and like the digital mechanics, within the game in a different color, just to kind of point out to them like, oh wow, okay, maybe I should be looking at this a different way.
You would be like, oh,
Yeah, that would be a
maybe.
lot of light bulbs popping, right?
Yeah, maybe. There are some people, and training I did at the beginning of the month. One person in particular is like, "Yep, heard it, listened, all the things, and nope, still won't include it." And it's okay. Well,
At least you can respect that, right? Like I have a lot of respect for someone that will at least sit down, hear it, try and take it
yep.
in, understand it, as opposed to just, and we've all run into it. And like you said, it's no disrespect to them. It's just not their cup of tea. But um, I feel like even if I don't understand something, I want to at least try it and learn it.
Hmm.
And then if it still doesn't stick with me, or it doesn't apply with the people that I work with, like that's okay. It just doesn't work for me. That's all right. But some people just have such strong opinions, and that's unfortunate, because I feel like that does damage to our entire, field as a whole. To just, obviously there's certain things that if it is harmful needs to be either uh, you know clearly understood or clarified by the person that is, doing the training, or saying whatever they're doing is, great, especially if it sounds like it's, some voodoo magic. But some things just need to be discredited if it is just, not um, research backed, peer reviewed backed, evidence based. Like, some of those things do need to be, kind of torn down in a very constructive way, and maybe just change, altered, whatever it may be. But to just outright deny something or to dismiss something, I don't know, it's just difficult.
Yep. whatever that might be.
Yeah.
And to do that without learning more about it as
Yeah.
well. I remember I took 2 classes in my PhD program intentionally because I recognized that I had an attitude about that topic.
Hmm.
And so, like, one of them was a really heavy psychoanalytic course.
Oh.
And I had a bit of a chip on my shoulder, I guess I'll call it, about that at the time. And, the whole um, Oedipal complex and all the oral anal phase and like all that kind of stuff. I was
Hmm.
just, I had a bee in my bonnet. So I was like, you know what? If I'm going to have something to say about this, then I need to be educated about
Yep.
it.
Absolutely.
And I remember my friends thinking that I was absolutely insane because, one, why would you take a course about something you're not interested in? And two, or wasn't aligned with you or whatever. And two, it was known as one of the hardest classes because it was so heavy. The reading was heavy, the discussions were heavy, the all the things. And I learned a tremendous amount. I actually learned some things that I agree with.
Hmm.
And then I learned things that I don't. And some of those I already knew I didn't, but it also gave me information to understand why I didn't. And so I
Right.
could have a much more educated conversation and decision making process than I could otherwise. And so, just like you just said, respect for the person who came, who sat, who listened, who hopefully integrated some of the information and
Oh yeah.
hopefully had a similar experience.
Hmm.
Hopefully, there was part of that was like, oh, I hadn't thought about it that way before, or might have sparked their understanding in another direction or whatever that might be. And maybe it's still not for them, but now they have an education to go along with their opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. Even if it's not that they're going to use it, but now that you've given them a certain way to understand when people are expressing it or, talking about it or saying why it means so much to them, they at least have an understanding of, okay, I don't personally use this, but I think that this is rich information. So let's continue to work around these things. Try and elicit a lot of those same feelings and beliefs through their mediums of play that they use to be able to work with that. So I think that as you said, that there's always things to take away from something, even if you don't agree with it. But what we're saying, and hopefully people take from us sitting here, is the fact that this can, digital play can be so beneficial in so many ways and enhancing in a lot of ways as well. And to just not be dismissive of it outright, and to go with it with obviously perfect ethics, to be able to understand, like what you always say, you know what you're doing and why you're doing it before you
Mm-hmm.
decide to try it, and you'll be surprised. I think that a lot of things will start to really flow out in ways that maybe you wouldn't have even thought about until you started touching digital.
And that there are so many concepts, and I know we only have 2 minutes left, so I'll try to be fast. But there are so many concepts that we we think of as being unique maybe to a certain approach or certain
Hmm.
theoretical foundation. And the more you learn, the more you realize that yes, there are certain outliers that are unique to a certain approach or
Absolutely.
theoretical foundation, but for the most part it's somebody calling a very similar concept a different name.
Yeah.
And so it's called this over here and this over here and this over here, but it really comes together in a way that is the concept that you may have in your own mind and be applying.
Hmm.
And so I think there are more similarities than there are differences.
Absolutely.
And the differences are important for each of us to understand as best we can. Mind you, it's a lifelong learning process. This is not something like you're going to go out tomorrow and have the emphasis of learning all of it and then you'll just know it forever. It's this lifelong learning, and that's one of the things I love about psychology
Hmm.
is that is something you'll continue to grow, continue to learn. I've been doing this for over 30 years and I'm still learning and growing all the time. Like I was
Yep.
explaining conversations with Dr. Grant. Like these are things I've thought about, but I'm thinking about them in a different way now, and they're
Hmm.
meaning something different to me now. And I hope that that will continue throughout all of our careers. And at the same time, there are a lot of similarities and a lot of foundational things that are just going to be true throughout time. That's why we have folk tales and folk stories and that get passed on through the generations and whatnot, because these are common human understandings. And
Yep.
the more we can acknowledge both and understand both, I think the better therapists we can be and the better humans we're going to be.
Yeah, exactly. Just one last sentence, kind of top that off. Just add what you're saying. It's again, the concepts stay the same. It's just the mediums that change because we adapt through society. So whether it's digitally or it's in a physical environment, with a physical toy or board game, that's just how society always progresses through time. But it's always the same concept, theme, like you said.
Yep. Well, I wish we had more and more time.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
But we're back. We'll get
Yep,
back on our regular schedule, and it's so nice to chat with you
absolutely.
as
Likewise.
always.
All right, we'll talk soon
All
and see you
right,
guys soon.
all right,
Bye.
bye.